Millionaire CEO leaves his safe open. What this amazing maid did next will shock you. Maria wiped the ornate table with shaking hands, her mind racing. The penthouse was a fortress of wealth, glimmering in the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The ethereal beauty around her felt like a cruel reminder of her own struggles. As she glanced toward the safe hidden behind a lavish painting, something shifted in her gut. With a twist of fate, she barely nudged it open. Her breath caught in her throat as she beheld the stacks of cash and papers, each representing lives twisted by greed and betrayal. Her heart hammered against her chest, the air around her thick with danger and temptation. Maria felt the weight of her responsibilities. Her 2 children, Danny, age 8, and little Sophia, just 4, depended on her. Each dollar mattered, every penny carved from her long hours as a maid to support them through the shifting, harsh realities of life in Chicago. Honest work is dignified work, her mother used to say. Yet here she stood, facing a choice that could either elevate her family's existence or plunge her deeper into the mire of moral compromise. Could she take money from a man who flaunted his wealth while trampling on the dignity of others? The prospect pierced her thoughts like an icy knife. And just as she hovered on that precipice, her decision blurred by the allure of escape from poverty, the CEO burst through the door. Maria's stomach twisted as she witnessed him berate a young intern mercilessly over a simple mistake. The man's embarrassment was palpable, every insult slashing through the air like glass. She felt her muscles tighten, anger swelling within her. How could someone so powerful wield such cruelty? Was this what it meant to climb the ladder of success? The moment crystallized in her mind, galvanizing her resolve. Her phone, once meant for coordinating school pickups, became her weapon of truth. Documenting this injustice was no longer an option, it was a necessity. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days melted into one another, yet every second felt amplified as Maria's footage went viral. Conversations filled her neighborhood, pinging between whispers of her bravery and the company's looming retaliation. Maria could sense the eyes on her, some supportive, others hostile, and she felt the pressure tighten around her like a vice. Danny shouted for joy at school, while Sophia caught glimmers of pride through innocent toddler eyes. But Maria's own reflection revealed growing fear, the weight of impending backlash gnawing at her edges. When news broke of the CEO's plans for a smear campaign against her, Maria's heart sank. It wasn't just a threat, it was a storm ready to unleash its fury. The thought of her children suffering because of her unyielding determination felt unbearable. Would they pay the price for her courage? The world outside became a battlefield, connecting the dots from her found gold to public disgrace, all while her conscience screamed for justice. The phone buzzed with ominous updates, chilling her resolve. Every decision became a battle, each moment another reminder that in the grand theater of power, one maid stood alone against the tide. The stakes had never been higher, and as she braced for her next move, all she could feel was the tempest building within, an undeniable force that could either drown her spirit or ignite a revolution. How long could she hold out against the relentless barrage of privilege aimed at silencing her truth? Maria stood in her tiny apartment, the faint scent of burnt toast wafting through the air as she struggled to focus on breakfast. Her hands trembled as she poured cereal for Sophia, the consequences of her choice slamming against her thoughts like waves crashing on a rocky shore. News of the CEO's smear campaign blared from the radio, each word laced with venomous intent. She couldn't escape the growing storm, it gnawed at her mind, wrapping around her like a vine intent on constricting her every move. Yet, there was also a flicker of determination in her chest. She had shone a light into dark corners, revealing the cruelty that accompanied unchecked power. The virality of her video had struck a chord, sparking discussions about ethics, workplace injustices, and personal accountability. Maria recalled the anger swelling within her as she witnessed the CEO's cruelty. That moment had given her purpose, and now it was time to embrace it fully. As she finished feeding her children, a plan started to solidify in her mind. She needed more than just emotional resilience, she needed a strategy. With her phone buzzing under the table, Maria realized that she could reach out to others who had been victimized, like the young intern she had filmed. Perhaps together they could construct a narrative that not only outlined her experience but those of others who had suffered under the weight of corporate arrogance. "Mom, are we going to the park today?" Danny piped up, his bright eyes full of innocence and hope. "Of course, Mijo," she replied weakly, forcing a smile, but her mind was already racing ahead. Fighting the urge to drown in despair, she took a deep breath. The park offered a chance for clarity, a place where she could escape the claustrophobic confines of fear that had begun to close in around her. Once they reached the park, the vibrant laughter of children was both a balm and a reminder of her own heavy burden. While Sophia chased Bubbles, Maria sat on a bench, her phone poised in her hand. She began drafting messages to potential allies, journalists, women's rights groups, and social media influencers who focused on justice and corporate ethics. Each notification chimed like a battle cry, guiding her fingers to type and retype, sharp with intention. "What if we teamed up?" she wrote to the intern, recalling his frightened expression when the CEO verbally lashed out. She included suggestions for a joint public statement, focusing on the toxic climate of fear that peppered the workplace when power went unchallenged. Just as Maria hit send, a familiar face approached. "Maria, right? I saw your video. I wanted to thank you," said a nearby woman, her expression earnest. "I've worked there too. You have no idea how your courage has inspired so many of us." A warmth unfurled in Maria's chest, a seed of hope taking root amidst the chaos. They exchanged phone numbers, and this woman became an unexpected ally, igniting a reminder of Maria's own strength. It was a pivotal moment, no longer was she alone. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows on the park, Maria felt the burden shift. While fear still loomed like an unwelcome guest, it coexisted with a growing resolve. She envisioned a movement, one that not only challenged her oppressor but also empowered others to reclaim their voices. That night, Maria gathered her children close, whispering reassurances of love and safety. The choice she faced was no longer about the money or personal gain, it was about laying the groundwork for something bigger, something transformative. With their futures hanging in the balance, she clung to the hope of solidarity and collective courage. But as the night deepened and her plans took shape, the unanswered question lingered: how would the CEO react to this burgeoning coalition? The battle was just beginning, and she knew she would soon have to confront him head-on. The moment of truth loomed, and Maria steeled herself for the fight that lay ahead. The following morning dawned with a piercing light that filtered through Maria's thin curtains like a reminder of the challenges awaiting her. As she maneuvered through breakfast, preparing toast that wouldn't burn this time, her mind replayed the events of the previous day. The brief connection with the woman in the park had infused her with a jolt of energy, a small intervention that felt monumental. The feeling was as if she were on the precipice of something significant, yet the weight of what lay ahead remained palpable. After her children were settled with their breakfast, Maria retreated to her tiny, cluttered living room, the remnants of a life squeezed between past ambitions and present struggles. The stillness felt oppressive, even as her heart raced with possibilities. It was time to dive deeper into her plan. She pulled out her notebook, a relic from her days in college that now served as a battleground for her thoughts and ideas. With each stroke of her pen, she began to map out her strategy. She realized she needed to compile not only her own story but also those of others who had endured similar mistreatment in the corporation. It was vital to build a narrative that showcased their experiences as a unified front. The anonymity of her own suffering felt insufficient, the stories of others would provide the necessary momentum, creating a human tapestry that the CEO's smear campaign couldn't dismiss. "Focus on the facts," she murmured to herself, her fingers grazing the page as she thought about the toxic culture. Fear hadn't just silenced individuals, it had strangled the truth. On the next page, Maria wrote a list of all the potential allies she could reach out to, people in the company still too afraid to speak up. Each name was a lifeline, a thread to entwine in her growing tapestry of resistance. As the hours passed, the children played nearby, unaware of their mother's brewing storm. The simpleness of their laughter contrasted sharply with the urgent thoughts racing through her mind. At that moment, confrontation transformed from a phantom of anxiety into a tangible goal. The real test, she mused, would be connecting with those who felt lost in the shadows, those willing to join her cause. Fueled by a new sense of urgency, Maria drafted another message, reaching out to the intern once more, this time with a clearer focus. Let us meet. There are others who want to share their stories. The first reply came an hour later, a string of words that crackled with shared determination. I can bring someone from my department too. They have a lot to say. The simple exchange sent ripples of hope coursing through Maria. They were not alone, they were beginning to create a network of voices, echoes that would ripple through a once coward environment. With excitement pulsing through her veins, she turned her attention back to the daunting task at hand, the imminent conversation with her CEO. Dropping a handful of repressed fears, Maria focused on the necessity of that meeting. She imagined herself walking into the corporate tower, no longer as a subordinate but as a woman armed with truth. The image was intoxicating, granting her the courage to envision a confrontation that would expose the reality hidden behind polished veneers. Later that evening, while Danny and Sophia slumbered peacefully, Maria stood before the mirror, her reflection staring back, a potent mix of resolve and trepidation. She practiced her words, searching for the right blend of assertiveness and clarity. She had to present her story as fact, not emotion. She needed to fight with precision, exposing the rot beneath the surface. Yet, beneath the fervent excitement loomed a chilling thought. What if the backlash escalated? What if the CEO fought back with venom? What if their attempt to speak out only led to harsher retaliation? As these uncertainties collided within her, Maria swallowed deeply, feeling both fear and resolution intermingle. The time had come to face the head of this corporation. Courage, she reminded herself, wasn't the absence of fear, but the will to move forward despite it. With her heart pounding, she clicked send on her confirmation for the meeting. It was an irreversible decision, opening the door to a confrontation that would change everything. Whether for better or worse was a question she'd find the answer to soon enough. This was the moment she had prepared for. As she climbed into bed that night, adrenaline pulsing through her, one question tightened within her mind: what strategies would the CEO deploy to maintain his grasp on power, and would she be ready to counteract them? The morning of the meeting brought with it an eerily calm atmosphere, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside Maria. She awoke earlier than usual, her body buzzing with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Gripped by a determination that felt foreign yet exhilarating, she slipped out of bed without waking the kids, her mind racing with the possibilities of the day ahead. Instead of getting lost in the chaotic rhythm of the household, she took a moment to breathe. Standing in the small kitchen, she prepared a cup of coffee and reflected on the strength she had been cultivating. Today was not just another day, it was the beginning of a transformation, both for her and for those who had been silently suffering under the weight of an oppressive corporate culture. She had tapped into something deeper within herself, an understanding that her experience was woven into a larger narrative of injustice. With each sip of coffee, Maria visualized the conference room where she would confront the CEO. The sterile environment, typically void of emotion, would become a battleground for truth. She mentally rehearsed her points, ensuring each statistic and personal story she intended to share was sharp and powerful. The memories of the intern's excited response echoed in her mind. She was no longer alone, they were rallying. Yet, her resolve waned momentarily as she thought about the repercussions. Would her boss see her as a whistleblower or simply as a disgruntled employee? Anxiety wrapped around her thoughts like a snake, squeezing. She reminded herself that this meeting symbolized liberation, not just for her but for others. It was time to dissolve that fear, replacing it with clarity. As midday approached, she turned to her notebook one final time, jotting down key phrases to guide her in the meeting: toxic work culture, shared experiences, the truth. They formed a tapestry of courage, a lifeline for herself and those willing to join this difficult journey. This was her identity now, and there was no turning back. The office was a hive of activity when Maria arrived, each person engrossed in their tasks, their eyes failing to notice the urgency building inside her. She suited up in a tailored blazer that felt like armor, the crisp fabric staving off fear. Buttoning it up was a ritual of sorts, signaling her readiness to confront whatever awaited her. The moment to enter the CEO's office arrived sooner than she anticipated. As Maria stepped through the door, she felt a pulse of uncertainty, quickly replaced by a wave of empowerment. The CEO, an imposing figure, was seated behind an expansive desk, but his stern demeanor only intensified her resolve. She was not there to acquiesce, she was there to reclaim her narrative. As she began speaking, the words flowed with urgency and conviction. The more she addressed the issues at hand, the more she recognized her internal strength pushing past ingrained fears. Each point she made sparked a flicker of acknowledgement in his eyes, and despite the tension, she sensed that he was listening, truly listening. But as the conversation deepened, the tone shifted. The CEO's calculated responses began to unveil a layer of defensiveness. "You must understand, Maria, these decisions are made with the company's best interests in mind," he asserted, his authoritative voice carrying a hint of condescension. In that moment, Maria realized there was a pivotal point of conflict. He was using corporate jargon to obfuscate the truth, to delegitimize her experiences. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a high-stakes chess game between power and truth. With her heart racing, Maria dug deeper, confronting not just the lies but the culture that allowed them to thrive. "It's about the people who work here, not just numbers on a balance sheet," she articulated, her voice unwavering. As the conversation grew increasingly charged, dread trickled back into her mind. What if he retaliated? Would her courage lead to professional ruin? Yet in that moment of confrontation, a realization dawned on her. The stakes were high, but so was the potential for change. With newfound clarity, she leaned in, her resolve solidifying. What began as fear transformed into an undeniable, palpable energy, the energy of someone no longer willing to accept silence in the face of oppression. As the meeting closed, Maria walked out with her head held high, pulse racing with adrenaline. But she also felt a haunting question looming over her, a question that would dictate her next steps. What kind of retaliation could she expect, and was she ready to face it head-on? Stepping out of the CEO's office, a cocktail of adrenaline and apprehension surged through Maria's veins. Her pulse quickened as she navigated the familiar office corridors, now transformed into a labyrinth of uncertainty. The confidence she had mustered moments before felt heavy, leaving her grappling with the reality of what she had just done. She had stepped into a place of power and claimed her voice, yet with that came the chilling awareness of potential repercussions. As she reached her desk, she paused, staring at the clutter that had once felt insurmountable. Quotas, reports, and stacks of unfinished work sat like remnants of her old self, the person who had kept her head down and her opinions quiet. But today was different. She was not just another employee anymore, she was an advocate in a fight against a toxic environment that had stifled innovation and growth. The hours dragged on, each tick of the clock intensifying her internal conflict. Maria found it difficult to concentrate, her mind replaying the details of the confrontation. The CEO's dismissive attitude, the way he downplayed her words, she could feel the weight of his skepticism. But in those moments, she had also glimpsed something pivotal, her strength. The recollection ignited a fire within her. What if she harnessed this momentum into something greater? Maria glanced around her cubicle. Her colleagues were buried in their work, their expressions exhausted, yet she had seen glimmers of dissatisfaction among them, a shared frustration too often left unaddressed. Perhaps, she thought, they needed a catalyst to spur change. She began to scribble down ideas, her anxiety slowly morphing into seeds of a larger plan. That evening, over dinner, Maria's mind raced while the kids excitedly recounted their day. As they chattered about school projects and friends, she marveled at how the innocence of their youth starkly contrasted with her own turbulent journey. It wasn't just about her anymore, it was about creating an environment where her children could thrive, where they wouldn't have to endure the corporate silencing she experienced. They inspired her resolve to push beyond the boundaries she had previously set for herself. After putting the kids to bed, Maria returned to her notebook. This time, she sketched an outline, a vision for a workshop aimed at educating her colleagues about workplace dynamics and fostering open discussions on the company culture. It would be a potential breach of company protocol, but the idea felt electrifying. She could lead a session on transparency and accountability, weaving her own experiences into a narrative that was both personal and broadly relevant. It was time to empower others and ignite change from within. With each sentence she penned, Maria felt her purpose sharpen. She mapped out actionable tactics, discussing pros and cons, charts detailing toxic patterns observed at work, and strategies to combat them collectively. This wasn't simply about her grievances, it was a way to unify voices that had long been buried under the weight of corporate indifference. Yet, a flicker of doubt clawed its way back into her consciousness. What if her company punished her for this? What if they criticized her for speaking out, or worse, retaliated against her directly? At that moment, she confronted her internal narrative. She could no longer afford to be paralyzed by fear. The possibility of repercussions loomed, but she understood it was now her responsibility to lead by example, not just for herself, but for those waiting in the shadows for someone to speak up on their behalf. The clock struck midnight, and as Maria closed her notebook, an invigorating sense of clarity washed over her. She was ready to confront the consequences of her choices. The upcoming week was destined to be challenging. Still, she could feel something shifting deep within her, a resolve that would not be easily diminished. As she drifted off to sleep, a new question danced in her mind: how could she prepare herself for the inevitable backlash, and what support would she need to withstand the storm she was about to unleash? The morning came too quickly, the sun's rays piercing through her curtains, a stark reminder of the battle she was about to wage. Maria wiped the sleep from her eyes and inhaled deeply, her apprehension rising like the morning mist. Today, she would share her vision for the workshop with her team, an invitation to challenge the status quo. As she dressed, her mind was a whirlwind of potential scenarios. What if her colleagues didn't respond positively? What if they were too afraid to join her in this endeavor? The familiar knot of uncertainty settled in her stomach, but beneath it lay a determination she had never recognized in herself before. At the office, Maria found herself oscillating between excitement and dread. Setting her notebook down on her desk, she took a moment to reconnect with the vision she had crafted, an empowering space where her colleagues could voice their thoughts without fear of retribution. Clarity flooded her senses as she glanced around the room. Was it possible that all these faces shared the same longing for change? When lunch approached, Maria gathered her courage. She pulled together the few colleagues she felt closest to her, chosen allies in this quest for a healthier work culture. Each arrived with varying degrees of apprehension and excitement, eyes glancing over her notes tentatively as they settled into their seats. Maria could feel their expectations hanging in the air. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice wavering slightly before she steadied herself, "about how we can create an environment where we feel safe to express our thoughts. I want to organize a workshop that encourages transparency and accountability. It's time we open the dialogue about our work culture." Each word hung in the air, waiting to be seized or dismissed. Their expressions reflected a complicated brew of curiosity and apprehension. "I don't know if that's the best idea," one colleague hesitated. "What if management retaliates?" Maria felt her heart race. This was precisely the fear she had battled through for so long, but here was the moment to confront it. "I understand that fear," she said, making eye contact with each of them. "But isn't it more frightening to remain silent and allow this culture to persist? This is our chance to advocate for ourselves." As her colleagues exchanged glances, Maria saw flickers of understanding and connection. Their collective uncertainty morphed into something palpable. Could they be part of this change together? The conversation buzzed with varying opinions, each voice contributing, revealing fractures in the usual silence that had blanketed the office. They shared their fears, experiences, and hopes. A flicker of solidarity sparked within the room. As Maria listened, she realized she wasn't alone in this fight. Uncertainty transformed into a collective yearning for a better workplace. Fueled by their engagement, Maria proposed a plan. Let us host an informal meeting to gauge interest and gather more ideas. It's a low-risk way to test the waters and organize our thoughts before approaching upper management. The words slipped into the air and hum with possibility. And then, as if remembering the dragon beneath the calm facade of the corporate structure, doubt seeped back in. What if management saw the meeting as a threat rather than an initiative? Taking a deep breath, she moved forward. No matter the outcome, we must start somewhere. Those of us in this room have the power to enact change. Together, we can build something new. At that moment, Maria felt a shift. The fear that had once paralyzed her morphed into a sparkling determination to be the leader she had longed to see in herself. As they wrapped up, a rush of adrenaline filled her. Maria's heart raced, her mind scrambling through the array of next steps. She must prepare for what would undoubtedly be scrutiny from above. Her colleagues were willing to join her, but what allies could she draw from within the higher echelons? As she closed the group meeting, one question loomed: who among them could help her face the anticipated storm, and how could they fortify their collective position in the company? The following morning, Maria returned to the office with a sense of newfound purpose. Taking the stairs two at a time, she felt the blood pump through her veins, each step igniting the embers of her ambition. The informal meeting had illuminated her path, and now, she was determined to carve out the channels necessary for change. As she settled into her desk, her mind raced with the implications of the meeting. The half-hearted criticism from her colleagues lingered in her thoughts. What if they were right? What if the risk outweighed the potential benefits? She shook off the doubts, reminding herself that every step taken toward transformation came laced with discomfort. Determined to balance her vision with practicality, Maria started penning an email to the broader team, inviting them to the proposed informal discussion. As her fingers danced over the keyboard, she realized that transparency also meant laying her ambitions bare, exposing herself to vulnerability. Would her colleagues see her as naive, or would they believe in the sincerity of her mission? Once the email was sent, Maria embarked on a quest for allies within upper management. She needed someone with influence, someone unafraid to endorse her initiative. James, the head of HR, came to mind. His reputation for empathy and support for his team's well-being was well known. However, Maria had never engaged him directly. The thought filled her with trepidation. She languished only briefly in doubts before crafting a message to appeal for a meeting. Maria calculated every word, infusing honesty about her desire for an improved workplace culture while subtly indicating the long-term benefits for the organization. Clarity was key. If she could articulate the potential gains effectively, she could awaken James's interest. As she clicked send, a weight lifted. Maria felt emboldened, but the nerves quickly returned. It would take time for James to respond, and she could not afford to remain idle. She decided to prepare for the informal team gathering. She had suggested a test run of sorts. Drafting an agenda, she laid out points to encourage participation. What challenges did they face? What aspirations did they have? It needed to feel collaborative. She wasn't there to preach, but to listen deeply. Throughout the day, she worked fervently, a whirlwind sweeping through her tasks but with a disciplined focus. In conversations with colleagues, Maria spoke of empowerment and the value of teamwork, drawing them into her vision. While she noticed the same hesitations in others, she also caught glimpses of intrigue flickering in their eyes. A few even approached her, offering thoughts or asking how they could contribute. It was as if she was planting seeds of hope, one conversation at a time. However, as days turned into a week, a creeping sense of impatience haunted her. Maria's anticipation for James's response felt like a ticking clock, with every unanswered moment amplifying her anxiety. She began researching effective workshop structures, finding innovative methods to stimulate dialogue. Her commitment to this cause transcended simple improvements, it resonated with her own evolving self-identity. The night before the informal meeting arrived, and with it, an unsettling cocktail of excitement and apprehension. In the quiet of her home, Maria faced herself in the mirror, searching for the resolve to lead with courage. What if no one showed up? What if the meeting brought nothing but disillusionment? Then, whispers of her earlier resolve echoed back. The moments of connection shared with her colleagues during the last meeting reignited her spirit. Maria knew she had already embarked on this challenging journey by merely daring to dream of change. And as dawn beckoned a new day, she took a deep breath, ready to walk into the room and wield her vision into reality. But just as she stepped out, her phone buzzed. A message from James flashed on screen. "I'm interested in discussing your proposal. What time works for you today?" The unsettling question now hung in the air. Could she stand tall against the scrutiny of upper management, or would she succumb to the fear of failure? Maria stared at her phone, heart pounding against her ribcage. The message from James felt monumental, a potential turn in her quest for organizational reform. Yet, beneath her excitement lay a thick layer of apprehension. What if he uncovered her insecurities? What if he questioned her capability to lead such a shift? Her mind swirled with those questions, mirroring the storm brewing inside her. After a moment's hesitation, she replied, suggesting a time that was convenient for her. Each ticking second felt like an eternity until his affirmation popped up on her screen. They would meet in an hour. Maria stepped away from her desk, tension winding around her. The pit of her stomach clenched as she approached the small conference room, its walls stark and unyielding. As she entered, she found herself obsessively rehearsing her talking points. She had meticulously gathered data to support her vision, employee engagement statistics, quotes from industry leaders about the value of a positive workplace culture, and even anecdotes from her colleagues. But now, faced with an authority figure, the words threatened to slip from her grasp. James arrived promptly, his demeanor friendly but professional. He offered her a warm smile that did little to ease her nerves. After brief pleasantries, he gestured for her to begin. The pressure was real, tightening like a vice around her chest. As she launched into her proposal, she could feel the quiver in her voice. She looked up occasionally, searching for a hint of encouragement in his expression. "And I truly believe fostering an environment where everyone feels heard can lead to enhanced productivity and job satisfaction," she concluded, bracing for his response. James shifted in his seat, his brow furrowed in thought. "Maria, your passion is palpable, and I appreciate your initiative. But have you considered how much effort it will take to facilitate these changes? What about those who might resist, or the resources this might consume?" His questions pierced through her bravado. She had envisioned this moment, yet she had no rehearsed responses at the ready. Stumbling, she thought about how to frame her reply. Change is always met with resistance, but it's imperative to address the landscape of employee satisfaction. I've seen firsthand that people yearn for connection. If we can create a culture that prioritizes engagement, will not only improve retention but unlock new potential across the board. James nodded, his demeanor thoughtful. "That's a fair point. But, would you be willing to pilot a smaller initiative first? Maybe gauge interest and gather some concrete feedback?" It felt like a compromise, a step forward yet cautiously restrained. Though a wave of disappointment washed over her, she recognized this as a vital opportunity, a chance to showcase her ability to adapt and pivot. "Absolutely. I can design a workshop that allows us to explore these topics in an engaging way, inviting input from across departments." As they discussed the next steps, a sense of clarity emerged. Each strategic question from James provided her with insights valuable for refining her approach. Amid the conversation, she felt an unfamiliar yet exciting sensation: resilience. It unraveled a deeper connection between her purpose and her newfound commitment to professional growth. When their meeting concluded, Maria left the conference room, buoyed by the sense of accomplishment. She had faced the scrutiny she once feared and emerged with the seeds of her vision firmly planted. Yet, a lingering mystery remained: what kind of resistance might she encounter as she moved forward? Back at her desk, her mind hummed with possibilities. She quickly began sketching out plans for the pilot workshop, allowing her creative instincts to flow. But just as she committed her thoughts to paper, an email alert caught her eye. The subject line read, "Feedback required, immediate response needed." The tension in her chest tightened again. Was this a setback or another hurdle she was destined to face? She clicked the email, feeling unprepared for whatever awaited her within those lines. Maria's fingers hovered above the keyboard, pulse quickening as she absorbed the contents of the email. It was an urgent request for feedback about her new workshop idea, one that had barely begun to take shape in her mind. It felt like being thrust back into the ring before she'd even had a chance to lace up her gloves. As she read the email, a mixture of anticipation and dread spiraled through her. The sender was Edward, a senior manager known for his blunt reviews. He had a reputation for stifling creativity with his skepticism and was notorious for narrowing the scope of proposals to fit his narrow vision of practicality. The pressure to formulate a response fueled her anxiety, the need for approval clashing with her inclination to innovate. "What do I even say?" she muttered under her breath. Maria's instinct kicked in. This moment could be a defining point, a test of her resolve. She mentally dissected the workshop concept: interactive discussions, cross-departmental collaboration, and a focus on engagement metrics. But how could she concisely communicate the value without falling prey to Edward's habit of critique? She closed her eyes for a brief moment, inhaling deeply, grounding herself in the foundation of her professional beliefs. Focus on the impact, she reminded herself, fingers poised to type. Every word had to persuade, to paint a picture of what success could look like if they dared to embrace change. With renewed determination, she began crafting her response. "I appreciate your promptness and commitment to gathering feedback. The workshop aims not just to boost engagement but to cultivate a culture where each voice contributes to a unified direction. I envision it being a platform for honest dialogue, where ideas can flourish without fear of dismissal." As she typed, her mind replayed James's advice about gauging interest first. She referenced potential metrics: a post-workshop survey to assess engagement levels and employee satisfaction to anchor her request in measurable outcomes. With each line, Maria felt her confidence bolster, painting a vivid canvas that bridged the gaps in her proposal. She hesitated, revising her sign-off before pressing send. It was not merely an email, it was a declaration of her rising authority. Each keystroke echoed her resolve to embrace this new phase of her career. Satisfied, she leaned back in her chair and allowed herself a moment of relief, glancing outside her office window, vision blurring as she lost herself in the potential future: thriving teams, optimistic faces, and a genuine culture of collaboration. However, that momentary calm shattered as another email notification pinged, a return message from Edward. Her heart raced as she opened it. The words "need more clarity" leaped off the screen. He had included a list of questions, each one harsh like a cold bucket of water on her pursuit of innovation. "What about target demographics for your workshop? Can you detail the expected outcomes?" he had asked. Panic surged again, but Maria recognized this as her defining moment, a chance to delve deeper into her project. The key was to transform these questions into opportunities for refinement. She felt the rush of adrenaline as she began to sketch out her answers. Each response was an opportunity to further align her vision with strategic company expectations. The workshop can target various demographics, fostering tailored engagement strategies to ensure inclusivity. We can set tangible goals such as a 20% increase in employee engagement scores post-implementation, she typed rapidly, energy fizzing through her fingertips. With each question she answered, Maria unearthed a hidden understanding: obstacles often concealed pathways to more profound insights. This realization catapulted her forward, revealing that while resistance was inevitable, it was also surmountable with careful preparation and confidence. As she finally clicked send, a wave of exhilaration washed over her. She had faced a hurdle and turned it into a stepping stone. But as she turned back to her notes for a final review, a chilling thought struck her. What if Edward's intentions were more than mere scrutiny? What if he sought to undermine her at every turn? The prospect of navigating such treachery made her heart race anew. The road ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but one thing was clear: she would need to prepare rigorously. There were more battles to fight, and strategies to devise. With this revelation invigorating her spirit, Maria's focus sharpened. The next chapter in her journey beckoned, one that would demand her finest efforts. What lay ahead might push her limits even further, and she would soon discover whether she possessed the resolve to rise above it all. Maria stood at the edge of her reality, feelings of foreboding hanging like a veil around her. As weeks passed since her informal meeting, the anticipation for her workshop started morphing into tangible outcomes. Her resolve had transformed into something sharper, more refined. Each day, her passion to create a collaborative workspace intensified, interwoven with her dreams for a better future for her children. As she prepped for the workshop, Maria felt ecstatic yet nervous. Feedback from her colleagues was steadily trickling in, signaling both excitement and apprehension. They yearned for change, but whispers of doubt reminded them of potential repercussions. Yet the budding resolve from her initial discussions began to melt away their trepidation, forging bonds as they collaborated. The idea was no longer just hers, it manifested a collective aspiration for improvement. In her small apartment, surrounded by crayon drawings of her children, Maria formulated the final touches to her workshop agenda. The blur of colors and laughter in the background contrasted sharply with the gravity of her mission. Would they solidify their commitment, or would fear strangle their initiative? The day arrived, and Maria stepped into the conference room, her heart beating with anticipation as her loyal colleagues began to funnel in. Their conversations buzzed with the same electrifying energy she had felt when they first discussed this project. She realized she was no longer a mere observer in corporate America. She had evolved into a pivotal force, driving change and fostering courage. As the doors closed, Maria welcomed everyone with her practiced words, crafted with precision. Thank you all for being here. Today is a chance for us to voice our thoughts, to cultivate a culture that recognizes every individual's contributions. The nods around the room were reassuring, the shared glances reflected a collective desire to emerge from the shadows of corporate indifference. Gradually, the discussions flourished into a dynamic exchange of ideas. Attendees opened up about their experiences, shedding light on struggles while simultaneously expressing aspirations for a collaborative future. Lighthouse moments emerged, as genuine camaraderie drifted through laughter and shared determination. As the workshop progressed, Maria found her footing. With each session, she recognized her skills manifesting into leadership. Challenges transformed into opportunities for connection, each voice weaving into a fabric of hope. Facing once familiar anxieties began to feel like reclaiming her narrative. There was immense power in unity. Then came the twist. Just as enthusiasm peaked, an unexpected email notification flashed across Maria's phone screen. It was from Edward, with subject lines ominous enough to induce panic. Maria quickly scanned. "I'll be monitoring outcomes closely." A mixture of dread and strength surged inside her. Would her meticulously crafted workshop withstand this scrutiny? For a heartbeat, fear threatened to retract her momentum. But then her resolve crystallized. The workshops weren't just her endeavor, they belonged to everyone who participated in forging connections. She reread the email, reading between the lines. Edward's skepticism could either be a blockade or a stepping stone toward institutional recognition. It was ultimately her choice on how to engage with it. As the final session neared completion, Maria decided to address the elephant in the room. "I've received feedback, and I've learned that we need to be prepared for challenges," she stated, her voice unwavering. "We need to document our experiences, track progress meticulously, and engage in ongoing conversations." Empowered, her colleagues nodded in agreement. The day closed with palpable excitement. By collectively drafting commitments, Maria felt lighter, yet more solidified in her authority as a changemaker. Weeks rolled into one another, and results began to materialize. Employee engagement scores increased by nearly 25% across departments, smoothing the edges of Edward's initial skepticism. Word of Maria's workshop found its way to upper management, and soon she found herself invited to present at a leadership meeting, an opportunity she had once envisioned only in dreams. Facing the room span of executives felt daunting. As Maria stood before them, she felt the solid grounding of her journey. It was no longer about being just a maid with a camera, it was about becoming a vessel for meaningful discourse. Culture isn't created in isolation, she began, presenting insights derived from her workshops. It is nurtured collectively. When we invest in our people, we reap the rewards of innovation, engagement, and productivity. The applause that followed echoed through her mind like a long-lost chorus. Maria left the meeting with newfound recognition, her heart swelling with pride. She accomplished more than she ever thought possible. She had manifested change and provoked thought among circles that previously felt inaccessible. As she settled back into her daily routine, one thing was hauntingly clear: everything had shifted since that day of uncertainty when she stood before a safe filled with temptation. Strength and vulnerability danced inside her side by side, creating a potent duality that allowed her to succeed. With her children asking her proudly about her work, she marveled at the soul-satisfying space she had created, and the fact that her bravery paved pathways to a future filled with hope and equity. This was her achievement, a transformation deeply rooted in purpose, now flourishing alongside her children's dreams. Each step felt steep and risky, but the view from the summit now unfolded before her. She had carved out an identity firmly rooted in courage and collective courage, emphasizing that real wealth existed in empowered voices. Now's the time for transformation. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is crucial. Comment your reactions and theories about this conclusion. Every voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this resolution. Don't wait even one more second to share the light of personal overcoming.